In this video, it is my intention to show it's a numbering grid pattern that starts in Genesis. And it's something that is very difficult to see, but there's something in there. Most people would look at Genesis and go, there's a lot of repeating numbers and there's a lot of weird things in there, including 900, 800, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 100 years and above. There's sequencing things happening in there that makes me go, something else is in there. This is not plain language. There's a code in there. And I pursued that and I went down 1,000 rabbit holes that I'm not going to do here. What I'm going to do in this video is just show what I have come up with and show how they're creating a grid system. You will see it for yourself once I reveal it to you. You won't have to take my word for it. You will look at it and go, I see that. That's incredibly important. That is incredibly important that you see what is there, not that you listen to me tell you what is there. I'm going to point to something I found. You have to look at it yourself. Now, I do want to say that even though you can just listen to these videos, I think what is missing in that process is we're missing a lot when we're looking at this. What I'm doing is bringing up Bible pages and showing the count of the numbers that are in there. So you almost want to visualize this. These are things that we can't do in our mind because we don't have them memorized. What I'm doing here is very cumbersome, but you have to watch if you want to see it. You have to look at what's there and think about what you're seeing. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the video. If you're looking for a very short explanation, it's not going to happen. There are people that say, you can cover this in 10 minutes. You know what? You will never get it because 3,500 years ago, they were using their lifetimes to build this. You're not even figuring out what's there. So it's very big. And it is, what is this? It's going to be, I'm going to take a very philosophical approach. This is not Christianity. It's not atheism or theism in any way, shape, or form. It's looking at the material and analyzing numbers and word counts. That's exactly it. Let's go ahead and get started on that. All right, what I'm going to be doing is utilizing Genesis. I've got a King James version of Genesis right here downloaded onto my computer. And what we can do here is use a navigation function to search for word repeats. Now, there's something that as I went along that at some point I'm just looking at the material, wondering why words sound the way they do or why they repeat things. And at some point, I'm thinking to myself, in fact, let me shut this off here and talk about this for a second. The way to manage this is in this way. Try to put yourself in a position where you're a 10, 15, 12-year-old kid, 20 years old maybe, 3,500 years ago. We're living pre-technology, pre-electricity. Life is normal, but we're sleeping on, some kind of a mat on a stone floor. Most of us probably don't have beds. We're, grinding our grain in the house to eat bread unless we buy bread. And, life is a lot different. And this material right here is memorized. We don't read. We don't write. We're intelligent. There's no schools, but this is memorized. Now, what I want to suggest is something that is, let me come up with an example here of why this is difficult to see. Right now, we don't have Genesis memorized. So there's certain patterns in there you cannot pull up. You have to pull up the book and go look. And you can't, as you're looking through the book, you're looking at them linearly. If you look at them up here, you can look at them spatially, three-dimensionally. So there's something that breaks down as soon as we take it out of memory and put it to a paper. And think of that as a normal mental mechanism. Think of projects or, hobbies, something that you have that you do that you're very good at. But early on, you weren't. You had to start with a book and go through things, and it was very cumbersome. At some point, you can sit there now and go, boy, I can pull it all up in my head. I can turn it around. I can spin it around. I can look inside and outside of it. You get to know it so well that you know it at that level. They knew this at that level. We're not even close. We're losing something right there. And then there's another part. Let's say you did have it memorized. Here's an example of the problem. I'm going to say a nursery rhyme, a short little one that we probably all know. Listen to this. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high like a diamond in the sky. I don't remember it all. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. And, you would think of that and go, yeah, I know that rhyme. I've got it memorized. Sure, we know that. At some point, though, another layer is revealed when somebody walks up and says, how many times was twinkle said? You have to start figuring it out. How about star? How about you start looking for word counts? And even though people have it memorized, they haven't gone in and thought about that, so they don't know the word count. You could have Genesis memorized and there are word counts in there, but you wouldn't know it. For example, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and Noah's name is repeated 40 times. If you take your Bible and go count at home right now, I will give you, there's a variation right here. If it's descended from the Torah, it's going to have a 41. If it's descended from the Septuagint, it'll be 40. There's a variation in there. Shh. Okay, it should be 40. We don't know those if we don't have them memorized and if we don't sit there in our mind and go count them. I find them by using the computer as my memory. Yeah. But you speculate that it's there and you start looking and something begins to reveal itself, and why we can't see it is also something that we can begin to grasp, that there is something that because we don't have it memorized and we don't know word counts, we're not getting access to the code. That's why we can't see it. So I am suggesting that they had access to things in the material because of memorization and because of the constant inquiry that they would have going on, this mental dialogue with this material. Look at what we do with our media. Imagine that this was your media right here, the couple of stories that you have memorized. You're going to spend your life with those, and they're incredibly complicated. But once you pull them out of here, we lose that capacity to see certain things. And again, we'll just see it as we go along. The interpretation is going to stay simple. It's going to be very starkly simple, despite the fact that it's going to sound complicated up front. But think of it this way. If this is being written for me to understand in some way, if there's something in there for me to understand, and I'm an intelligent kid back then, and I've got this memorized, all of the clues that I need are contained within this. I don't need to I don't need to know algebra or geometry or calculus or anything like that. What we're going to do here is see patterns, and we're going to look at the patterns and we're going to count them, and we're going to start seeing with that count what they're doing. Something is going to emerge. All right, take a look here. This is how crazy I got with it, and we're going to back up a little bit, and I'm going to show you where I got here. But look at this. Okay, this should not look familiar to anyone, but these are the numbers in Genesis and what I did with them. There's a point in an Adam's lineage analog farm, or Adam's lineage. I call it an analog farm. One of the first numbers is 130. And so you would think that that's 130. Then there's a 800, there's a 930, 105, 807. At some point, I'm looking at those in a different way, and I'm thinking that these 30s, the 5s, the 12s, the 10s, the 40s, they continue to appear at other places without the large number up front. And I thought, well, let me separate them out. This is one of the rabbit holes. Let's try this. Let's see what happens here. So instead of saying 130, you say that's a number 100 and that's a number 30. This one is just plain 800. This one is not 930, but it's a 900 and it is a 30. So start separating them out. They've been combined. At some point, I start running into things down here like 30 was said 7 times. 800 was repeated 7 times. 900 was repeated 7 times. 100 was repeated 5 times. 5 times 5. It goes on, and I'm not going to go on to this because it'll make you bleary-eyed if you don't catch up to it. I'm going through other analog farms, and I'm going through, and all I can say right here is that I'm pulling up numbers and number sequences that I look at and go, these are not random numbers. They're not. They are repeating, and they are repeating sequentially. What is going on? It's the most bizarre thing. Okay, forget about all those numbers. Those right there, those are the numbers from Genesis. Put in that pattern right there. Whew. Okay, if we had them memorized and we did word counts, we could figure that out. But without having it memorized and without knowing that, we're just poking, prodding, testing, using the computer for memory, stumbling along, trying to figure it out. That 7-3 grid is important. And then the numbers being repeated 7 times is important. Something is going to emerge. Let's get into it. Okay, here it begins at the end of the first creation story, the 7-day creation story. This is where I'm going to tell you that they're going to be utilizing repeats to show numbers. Right here we have a 7, but 7 was said 3 times. 7th day was repeated 3 times. Right here at this point, we are also parallel to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, naked and unashamed. So this is going to all tie into this point right here. The good time in life before first sin is where the 3-7 grid begins. And I don't believe I said it, but the two creation stories, put them side by side. There's a 7-day and there's a 5 rivers in Eden one. If you put them side by side, the 7 and 3 appear at the same time that they are naked, unashamed in the garden. That's what I mean. Okay, so without a lot of high detail, let's just start building this up. Go for the ride, you'll see it. It'll take a while to unfold. What I've got is Eden from the end of the second creation story, aligned with 3 and 7, both of them, because that was repeated 7 times. 7 was repeated 3 times. So that's the clue that we grab those. And we're going to line them all up, and we're going to call that a good place, so I'm just going to make them green. Then we know the next step, I'm just jumping ahead, is going to be first sin. I'm going to call that 8. And just as a hint of what there is ahead, traditionally circumcision happens in Judaism on day 8. All right, so as we move through Genesis, the next number is mentioned in verse 15 of chapter 4. This is the Cain and Abel story. So after the 7 said 3 times up there is not another number until we get down to verse 15, and they're talking about Cain and Abel. And I'm just going to say that what I see here, if you take a look at this, I'm going to just tell you what I'm doing. 7-fold is said 3 times here. So 7 and 3. 7 said 3 times, 7-fold said 3 times. Right here in the middle of it, I've got 70. I'm going to grab that 70 and say that is now one of the numbers on the list. So now we've got a 3, a 7, and a 70. Remembering that as we're going through here, those are the kind of clues we're going to get. That's what we have to work with. What do we do with these numbers? Let's just try this and see what happens. So I put it on the list here, and you can see that I've converted everything to just digits instead of it being written out as a 3 or a 7. You see what I did. Okay, so I've got Eden, 3, 7, and I put a 70 there. I'm going to leave all the 3, 7, and Eden as green because I've confirmed them. That 70, well, I'm going to leave it black here because I want to see a little bit more. I don't know that I can confirm that as a good number, but let's just move on and see what we come up with next. So from this area, I move on, and what do I run into next? I go to chapter 5 and the book of generations of Adam. This is going to be a lineage, and Adam lived 130 years. Now, this is the first place that I'm going to say in Genesis is what emerges as what I have identified as an analog farm. This is where we are collecting a bunch of numbers. Now, if I go and start looking at what I have going on here, what I've already decided is to consistently separate these numbers. That's not 105, that's 100, and that is a 5. This is an 800, and this is a 7. Okay? What happens if what I somehow have to do is link these from the 7, and I look, well, there's a 7 right there. That's from the 3-7 grid. Does 800 mean 7? How could that be? And you know what? Watch this. If I go search 800 emerges exactly 7 times. So indeed what we have right here is 800, which represents 7 and a 7. You have to play these out in the mind. What is that 800 for? What is the 900 for? People don't live this long. You either have to accept it, try to explain it, or look at it and go, that's a bizarre thing. And then later it does another one, another lineage with 700s and 600s. There's lower numbers, that there's something going on that doesn't seem right. But as you look at it, you start seeing numbers here like 130, 30, 40, 10, 30, 5. 2. Do we see that on the end here, 30, that there's beginning to be repeating numbers here that it just seems, let's just keep collecting them the way that I'm talking about and seeing what's happened and see what happens. Okay, so at this point, really just having high suspicions that we're really behind the ball, I'm going to start looking for things that we would have known if it was 3,500 years ago and we could sit and talk about this. I'm going to say, how many times? I'm going to ask you, how many times did they say 900? And you start thinking and go, oh, let's see, it was here, here, here. And then you come back and tell me, it was said 7 times. Oh, that's cool. What about 800? It too was said exactly 7 times. So let's do this. Let's pretend like that is a 7 and not a 900. Every time is a 900 or every time there's an 800, let's pretend like it's a 7 that's going out and grabbing another number. Yeah, let's do that. And the 100, same thing. Okay, so in this particular rabbit hole, what I am suggesting then is that if you think it through, if they're using that 7 to go out and collect numbers, and they showed us just previously on the last one where the 7th was repeated 3 times and the 70 is gathered, let's just go ahead and do that. They can't keep doing that. It would look too obvious. So you start gathering them in other ways. So instead of sending out a 7, you send out a 900 that's repeated 7 times. Or you send out a 800 that's been repeated 7 times. And what those are doing by putting those in the story is that they are now hooking up with other numbers that are the numbers that we're going to collect. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm going to take every number that appears at the end here of an 930, the 930. I'm going to grab all of those, the 30, the 7, the 12s, the 15s, everything that is a trailing number on these and put them on the list. Let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, after doing that, I've got a list that looks something like this. From the Eden and the 3-7 grid, we've got that 70 that started out showing us what to do. And then by beginning to repeat numbers in other ways, it collects with these. But okay, so let me show something else. Let's take a look at some of the numbers that are in here. Number 7, for example, that are in this analog pool. Let's take a look at something that's pretty fascinating. Back to chapter 5 here, what I'm going to do is search for 7. This is just something that if we had them memorized, we could do this. We would know it. And I see that right off the bat, if I'm searching, it looks like 7 comes up 7 times. But if I check down here, I see that, no, that's not right. Actually, there's a couple of 70s in there. Yeah, 7 only appears 5 times. 70 appears twice. 70 twice. Okay, why is this a good thing? Remember we had our 70 that we didn't have confirmed. And remember earlier, the very first, remember where we picked up the 70 to begin with. We had our 7-fold said 3 times and then grabbed a 70. Now what do we have here? We have a 70 being used 2 more times. So now between the beginning of the Bible till now, 70 has appeared 3 times. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone back to my list here that's growing. I've got this whole green pile here, the Eden 3-7 grid. The 70 has now been said 3 times. 5 is there, it's collected 12, 15, 30, 40, 10, 2, 60, 9. 800 and 900 were each repeated 7 times. You see how they're branching out. They start with the original 3 and 7, send out something that repeats a certain amount of times or that just connects with those numbers. And those are becoming, if we go down this particular line of thinking with them, it's going to emerge someplace. It does get someplace. This is a viable collection of numbers here. All right, I do want to say that I don't have this, I'm certain I do not have this completely figured out, but I want to show a couple of more things in here. For example, if we go up here and search the number 30 from that section, it appears 3 times. 3 is one of the analogs, and 30 is one of the analogs collected elsewhere, plus 30 has been repeated 3 times within this analog farm. 7. We did that. We took out the 7T and just went with the 7s, and there's 5 of them. And 5 is one of the numbers on the list as well. So 7 appears 5 times. And they're both analogs. So they're pointing to each other as well as being gathered up elsewhere. They seem to be cross-referencing internally and confirming themselves for us. Okay, we're going to do a deeper dive. This time I see a number, 17. And it appears in a couple of places that I'm curious about because it doesn't. Yeah, I want to know what that 17 is for. Let's go look at it and see how we're going to analyze that and see that indeed it too does become an analog. Okay, I'm back to the King James Version, and right here I am at the chapter 7. This is during the flood period. And there's a part down here where the 17 occurs. I've got a 17th right here. It's verse 11. It says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month. Okay, if I were to look for 600, "600" is said exactly 3 times. So what does that mean? In the same way that the 800 and the 900 took on the role of a 7 by being repeated 7 times, we've got a 600 taking on the role of the 3 starting from where? The 3-7 grid. And that one, bingo, there we have. So 600 is said 3 times to begin with, and there we have it as, because of that, it'll get the green status because it links to a 3. Makes sense? Noah, we talked about that before. Noah's repeated 40 times, depending on which version you read. It should be 40 times. It should be 40 times. 40 is a good thing. The flood, all of those things are good things. They're purging. In the second, 2 is on our list. It was gathered in one of the analogs. So here we have 3 different green numbers. A 3 hidden behind the 600, a 40 hidden behind Noah, and a second right in plain sight, pointing to the 17th. Well, that sounds fine. Let's put it in there. Can we confirm it? Down here, there's a repeat of it. And the ark rested in the 7th month. Do we have a 7 there? On the 17th day of the month, up on the mountains of Ararat. But right there we have our 7th and our 17th pointing, and up here we have it. So right there we have a 17 we're going to add to the pool. Make sense? That's how do you encode this? How else would you encode this? If there's something in here, and make it accessible to whoever is carrying it. Yeah, that's it right there. Okay, before moving on to a Sodom analog farm, take a look. You'll never be able to read this again without realizing these are pointers. This is for the flood. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. 40 is said twice. 7 days pointing to 40 2 times. And after 7 days, the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. 40 was said a total of 4 times, but it was pointed to by 7 right there. So 7 again is pointing to 40. 40 and 7 both on the list. Okay, I've done the same thing. I've isolated chapter 18 out into its own document so that I can search it without being affected by the entire Genesis. It's important to bring them all together, but right now we're starting at a small level. As I go through here, this is what I've learned to recognize. Remember the 7 said 3 times. Remember that repeat? That's what gets your attention. What do we have here? What if there will be 50 righteous within the city? Will you destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are there? To the righteous, the 50 righteous, 50 righteous. What you see is that same kind of repeat going on. So if you go search for what is there, you will see that righteous appears. Oh yeah, what do you know? 7 times. Bingo. We're back into an analog farm. This is starting off with righteous taking on the role of 7 now. Righteous is going to be put on the analog pool as that place, the same location, as well as it's taking on the role of 7, so that all these numbers here, the 50s, that are said 4 times, we've got 5 that is already on the list. 40's already on the list. 30's already on the list. Now we're going to pick up a 20, and I think we got a 10 already on the list. So we're starting to see doubling up of ways of pointing to those numbers in some very strange sounding ways. Okay, so here is our current updated list. We've got numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, 15, 17, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70. 800 and 900. Each was repeated 7 times, and you know what? All through Genesis, that's the only time they repeat. 600, only 3 times. Noah, 40 times. Corrected count from 41 to 40. I will discuss that with anybody. It looks like I'm fudging it. I'm not. There is a modification to Genesis that it's a whole different video. It's a different story. It should be a 40 count, though. Righteous was said 7 times in the Sodom analog farm, chapter 18. And I want to point out something right here. You notice that the 3-7 grid, that down here, the first sin happens on day 8. Keep that in mind. You see that advance from 7 to 8? Here, I just jumped ahead. Let me describe what's going on. If 7 is a pure place and 8 is not a good place, each one of these advances upward. I'm not sure about the lower numbers, but I'm sure from 8 up above. So from 7 to 8 is a jump from good to bad. That would mean that 10 to 11 is the same jump. 12 to 13 is the same jump. 15 to 16, and so on. You see that? There's a reason for that. This is going to just sound goofy, but you know what? We're about ready to start putting these to use. They serve a number of purposes, including a dictionary. What's good and what's bad. And you know what? I just backed up and added 4 to this. There's a reason as I'm doing the research and doing this video, I'm seeing there's a reason for that. So the jump from 3 to 4 is definitely one. I would say that's probably likely that the jump from 5 to 6 is one, but I don't see one yet. I'm not going to add it in. So I will wait. I do see a 4 coming up though that is not a good thing. So I know it's going to fit on that list. There are analogs that we can tell. Sodom. Is that good or bad? That's going to be bad. So if throughout the entire chapter 18 it's repeated 4 times, it is going to be on the list of red, of bad. All right, let's take a review of the numbers here again. We've got a 17 there, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. See that? There's a 3, 7, 10, 12, 15. Okay, let's go to chapter 18 and look at a couple of things. Okay, here we have, it is just chapter 18 from the King James Version up through verse 33. That's all I'm going to be searching here. So I'm going to grab a couple of things. Mamre, that's only said 1 time. Okay, that's fine. That's probably a good thing. Since we're not sure about that Mamre, let's go ask the master. Somebody knows more than us that has this memorized and has thought it through better. So we're going to go ask this master in the entire book of Genesis. How many times does Mamre show up? And they will tell us 10 times. 10 times. So we know that it's good and it's on the list. So even though it only shows up, so showing up there once tells us that it is, that number 1 is a good thing, that 1 is good. We know that Mamre is good because it's said 10 times in Genesis. Therefore, if it's said 1 time in a chapter, 1 is a good number. All right, let's put that on the list. Tent. Tent is repeated exactly 5 times. Is that on our list? Yep, it sure is. What else do we have? How about, I know, Sarah. Sarah's name is repeated exactly 10 times in here. Is that on our list? Yep, it is. We've got our righteous. What else can we look for in here? Abraham. Abraham is 13. Do you know what that means? Abraham's on the bad list. Abraham's red. Sarah's good. Abraham is bad. Abraham is, this is weird. Abraham is the start of it all, isn't it? When you get to the template, Abraham represents something different. Abraham is not a historical figure. Abraham is representing something different. And in this case, in this template right here, it represents an iteration of our life that is not yet complete. So it's okay that Abraham is not pure. Abraham is not going to be going on to the promised land, is he? No, he has children. It's going to get passed along. So that's why that is that way. It's just a bit of a sidebar. This isn't all the numbers, but a good collection of them. 2, 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, 17, 20, 30, 40, 50. Those 11 numbers are used 3,352 times. Those 11 numbers are repeated, which to me, I mean, when you read through, you just see things. It's an inordinate amount. It's not, they're not random sounding. They don't sound right. They sound patterned. All right, I'm going to shift into a reveal instead of a buildup. What I have right here is chapter 14 separated out. And, what I want to say right here is that if you look up all of these, I'm going to pick out just a few of them. I'm kind of going crazy with this one here, but I'm using it for research. If I look up Sodom right here and go to Genesis and find out how many times Sodom is repeated, in this chapter 14, it is repeated 8 times, which is what? 1/7. And throughout Genesis, it is repeated 21 times, which is what? 1/20. You see that? Gomorrah, 4 and 9. 9 is an unknown. 4 is 1/3. So we've got an issue there, but 9 I'm not certain. Ready to move on, perhaps? There are many that are valley, for example. It said 3 times in here, 7 times total. Valley's a good thing. Salt sea, 1 and 10, good thing. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer. That means 12. We're from the pure side. And in the 13th year they rebelled. Does that sound like? And on day 8 they had first sin. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer. Okay, so I want to point out a few things like that. I think that's enough for that chapter. What I want to do is just jump around and show a few things, like the size of the ark, for example. What do we see here? It's 300 cubits by 50 by 30, 50 and 30. We recognize those numbers now, right? 300 has been said 6 times. There's a reason for that. I'm still a little bit foggy on some of this stuff, but you can begin to see that there are numbers being used that are coming from this pool. And they might sound different because you would think, well, it's not the same size as something else or the same numbers, but they're just blending and mixing them around. Let me try to review this without it. I know it takes a while to figure all this stuff out, so I'll do my best here. But look up above, we've got our green list right here. That is all of the good things. We've got our Eden and all of our numbers, things that were repeated a number of times to collect more. Then we go in and we start realizing that words are repeated the same amount of times up here, names and words that's going to give them the same designation as a green place, a good place. Noah repeated 40 times. Righteous 7 times in Sodom analog form. Covenant 7 times to Noah after the flood. Plains 12 times. Mamre 10 times. This is throughout all of Genesis. Sarah, I've got that wrong. Sarai. Sarai is 17 times. Which also shows, what is that right there? It's also showing us a 10 plus 7. So they're showing us that they can now combine the numbers. You don't just have a 10 and a 7 to use, but if you took a 10 and a 7 and added them together, you've got a 17. Now what happens? We've got a tent. Tent is said 27 times. It's a good place. It represents yourself in a pure state. 20 and 7 both come from that pool. So after the 17 was shown to us, now we know we can add those. So that's how we can make things sound different. You take a 40 and you take a 3 and you put them together and they mean this green place. You take a 30 and you take a 7 and you put them together and they mean the same place. But guess what? They don't sound like it, do they? You have to know something in the background. All right, blessed 3 times, rested 3 times, naked 5 times. Remember, this is spiritual. This is uncovered. This means I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to fear. I have forgiveness. Flood 12. Good thing? Yeah. That's how you purge things out. Destroy 20. Yes. Good thing. That's how you purge things out. But you're destroying what you're carrying with you. Bow, rainbow 12, and so on. If you keep going through Genesis and doing that to words, you're going to find they're just going to keep popping up with incredible regularity into zones. We get down here to first sin. What did we just pick out? Abraham, 134 throughout all of Genesis. 100's a good number. 30's a good number. But guess what? 4 is not. Bingo. We're over the limit. We're 1 up. If it was 133, it'd be okay, but not at 134. Wicked, 8 times. Creature, 8 times. Thigh, 8. Remember all the time, put your hand under my thigh and make a promise to me. Whatever those are bad things. Sodom, 21, and so on. So, does that look crazy to you? Okay, it's more than I ever thought. I saw patterns, and as I started digging in, I was like, oh my, I'm astounded at what I see here. Now, let's take a quick look at something that I will let you know that this is maintained throughout Abrahamic material. Let's look at a couple things. All right, I've got a different version that I'm going to use. I've got Job NRSV updated edition. There, if you download and you do this yourself, there's a really significant gotcha with ones like this, and that is that there have been a lot of notes added in. For example, if I wanted to search how many times Job's name appeared, I'd have to go through all of the entire book and make sure that all of these, the ones that are added in, the name of it, the book up above, and right down here where it says Job and his family, attack on Job's character, Job loses property and children. Those were not part of the story, and they'll give you false hits. So I always just like break it up with an asterisk in the middle or something like that. You have to do all of that if if you want to do a word search with an NRSV. If I was to start right here with Job, if I wanted to look up land of Uz, for example, Uz, is that a good thing? This is, I'll find some funny things. It sounds like Uz is said 3 times, but if I look, Uz is only said once. 1 is a good number, though. That's fine. It comes from a good place. But we have something down here that's called Buzzite. The Buzzite. And we're going to find all kinds of that sort of linking up going on, which is strange. All right, but let's go back to the beginning. The man was blameless. Blameless. What does blameless sound like? Blameless is said exactly 10 times. Blameless is good. But even right here in the verbiage, without even digging up any numbers, it starts right off with, there were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. There's the start of our 7-3 grid right in the beginning of Job. He had 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen. We've got our 7 3s, 500 donkeys. Okay, do we see those in there? Let's see what else we have that we should be looking at. Let's just grab another number here and see how many times it shows up. Loathsome sores. Okay, let's try that one. Loathe. Job, I loathe my life. You know what? This might be, maybe this is not the best thing to do right now. I don't have the document prepared to search in this way. Okay, but you see that there's a couple of them there that you look at and go, yeah, those 7s and 3s are popping up all over the place. I'm just going to show you a couple of things really quick that are kind of in your face obvious almost. We've got the King James Version of Matthew up here. What I'm going to do is search for I know the 3 7s and 12s are common, so let me try something here. How many times does 3 show up in Matthew? 12 times. What about 7? 12 times. How bizarre. How about 12? 12 times. Okay, we can just keep on doing this. Those ones are, like I said, kind of like, what, really? that's a little bit obvious. But you know what? You can see, though, I need to end the video. They get so long, but you can see the depth. You can see the difficulty in seeing this and why we don't see it. All my life, I never saw this until I'm starting to, there's something eventually you hook into and you find something there and you see why we don't see it. And the only way I can now and demonstrate it is because I have the computer to show that. You can, if I was telling you that those numbers were there, you would say, I don't even know what this guy's talking about. With the computer, you can look and go, I see him pulling that up. I could at least do that myself and verify that. This is demonstrable. It is demonstrable. It's there. It's counted. You got to be aware of downstream translations, things that are added in, or words that have been changed, verbiage that has been changed to try and clean things up. I go upstream for this word search as far as possible with the King James Version, being aware of some verbiage, strange things in there. Anyway, okay, if you follow my work, if you see this, if you have any ideas about how I can maybe convey this better, I don't have any graphics or things like that. I don't have that kind of capacity. Really, it's going through the material. I realize it's very mental old stuff. And I think unless people get on board with it in that same manner, it's just not going to be seen. The people that criticize it after a few minutes, yeah, you'll never see it. It's just too deep. If you have any ideas, thoughts, questions, things you want me to look at to, make comparisons, by all means, please leave any questions, comments, and ideas below. This is much deeper than I'm showing. This is barely scratching the surface. It's very deep. Moreover, there are still patterns in there that are doing something that I don't recognize what they are. It is, I can see something is happening that I don't understand what it is doing, but there is still something cycling along in there. Anyway, okay, the best I can do is keep digging at it like this. It's a lonely place to be. I wish it wasn't. Anyway, okay, hope this was interesting and engaging, and I'll see you in the next video.